Welcome to Chapter 10.5, The Muslim Civilizations. The Ottomans were Turkish-speaking nomads who had expanded into Asia from Asia Minor and into the Balkan Peninsula by the late 1300s. They were successful in capturing Constantinople in 1453, and the city was renamed Istanbul and became the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire enjoyed a golden age under Suleiman, who ruled from 1520 to 1566. He expanded the empire into Asia, Africa, and Europe, although he was defeated in Vienna in 1529. The empire remained the largest and most powerful in Europe and in the Middle East for centuries. Suleiman had absolute power, but a council also helped him to govern. He based the justice system on the Sharia law, as well as the royal edicts. The top two social classes in the Ottoman society, military men and intellectuals, such as scientists and lawyers, were nearly all Muslims. Below them were men involved in trade and production, and then there were farmers. All people belonged to religious communities, which provided for the education of the young and legal matters. The Jewish community, which had been expelled from Spain, possessed the international banking connections that benefited the Ottomans. Ottomans converted some young Christian boys to Islam and trained them for government service. Some were chosen for the Janissaries, or elite forces of the Ottoman army. The brightest became government officials. Ottoman culture included great poets, painters, and architects. However, after Suleiman's death, the empire declined, and by the 1700s it had lost control of areas in Europe and Africa. By the early 1500s, the Safavids united an empire in Persia, which is modern-day Iran. They were Shiite Muslims who fought with Sunni Ottomans to the west and the Mongols in India to the east. Their greatest king, or Shah, was Shah Abbas, who ruled from 1588 to 1629. He created a strong military, and he developed military alliances with Europeans. Abbas lowered the taxes and encouraged industry, and he tolerated other religions and built a capital in Isfahan, which became a center for the silk trade. After Abbas's death, the empire suffered from religious disputes until its end in 1722. In the late 1700s, a new dynasty, or the Qajars, won control in Iran. They made Tehran the capital and ruled until 1925. Gunpowder was introduced to the rest of the world from China in the 1300s, after Marco Polo's journeys through China and later travelers coming with gunpowder to the West. And these new weapons changed warfare, introducing cannons and muskets and reducing the importance of mounted warriors. From 1450s until 1650s, this was called the Age of the Gunpowder Empires. And the Ottoman Empire was just such a gunpowder empire, because it gained its greatest prize, Constantinople, with this huge cannon that was developed by a iron worker from Hungary. In the 1300s, this Central Asian people group immigrated into Asia Minor. They were Turkic-speaking nomads, and they rode horses and lived off of the land, and until they began conquering areas that are in red on this map. So they decided to attack the Byzantine Empire, which is where these borders are found. Their greatest leader was a man named Mehmet II, who determined that it was essential to capture Constantinople. So he began to lay siege to that great city, which is now called Istanbul. It took him 54 days, and also a 20-foot cannon, which blasted holes in Constantinople's walls. Constantinople was a great prize for the Ottoman Empire, and they renamed it Istanbul. And under Suleiman the Magnificent, however, the Ottoman Empire's new capital, Istanbul, reached its greatest extent. Suleiman the Magnificent ruled from 1520 to 1566, and this time period is called the Golden Age for the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman was an extremely capable ruler. He was very wise, but he managed to maintain absolute power over his dominions while delegating power to his Grand Vizier and his advisors, who were his council. His empire ran on Sharia law, which was based on the Quran. Ottoman society was hierarchical, and it had several different layers or echelons. The highest echelon were the fighting men and the scholars. The scholars being lawyers, scientists, judges, poets, etc. These were the top. They called themselves the defenders of the state. The second tier were the merchants and the tax collectors and the artisans. They were called men of negotiation. The third tier were the farmers and the herders. They were called men of husbandry, which means they took care of things. Then finally, those at the bottom were the non-Muslims. And they were allowed to organize themselves into millets, which are spelled M-I-L-L-E-T-S. And these were Jews or Christians who were allowed to create internal governments that and keep the peace and have the laws that they were used to under their own religious hierarchies. These were given extraordinary freedoms because they were considered to be people of the book. Another interesting group of people were the Janissaries. The Janissaries were Christian slaves that were taken probably from the Balkan areas of Eastern Europe and put into intensive Muslim training schools. So they were trained to become a Muslim fighting force that was loyal only to the Sultan. Some of these were, if they were the brightest and the best, they were given special training to become political diplomats as well as fighting men. So these Janissaries were often given positions in the Ottoman governments and became viziers or governors or sultans of certain areas. After Suleiman's death, the Ottoman Empire began to slowly decline. Suleiman, unfortunately, had suspected his own sons of treason, and two of them specifically, the ones who were most capable, were also the ones who wanted to rule instead of their father. And so he had them killed. And that left the empire to a much less capable Salim II, who didn't really care about governing and left the government to his ministers, who were corrupt and incompetent. Also, he allowed the Ottoman military to atrophy and to not gain a lot of new technology. So European technology quickly surpassed the Ottoman technology, and it became outdated. The Safavid Empire, which was directly east of the Ottoman Empire, was often at war with the Ottomans. They were competing for territory, however, and they were also of different religious sects within Islam. The Safavids were Shiite, where the Ottomans were Sunni, and those differences made them incompatible. The Safavids also were often at war with their other neighbors on the west, the Indian Mughal Empire. These were all Muslims, but the Safavids were Shiites, whereas the others were Sunni. The Safavid rulers called themselves Shahs. And the greatest Shah was named Shah Abbas. He was ruled from 1588, which is the year that the Spanish Armada sailed, by the way, until 1629. He managed to centralize his government and bolster his military so that he could mix military force and diplomacy in order to maintain his borders. He also reduced taxes on farmers and herders, which encouraged their economic growth, and it created a much stronger middle class in the Safavid Empire. And he also built a new capital in Isfahan, which soon became a center of the silk trade. Eventually, though, after the Shah Abbas's death, the Safavid Empire declined.